Good evening, everybody. My name is Sean Harrison. I'm the chair of IPHO Student Development Committee and one of the many individuals who has been working this year to bring you the VIP case competition. I'd like to welcome you all to this Midpoint Webinar, which I'm hoping will be a springboard into the second half of the competition. We've had some really great submissions for the Midpoint, a lot of creativity, a lot of hard work, and it definitely shows. I'm excited to see everybody here tonight to learn and be receptive to everything that we've got going on in the second half. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Matt Schmidt, who is our committee advisor. Now, Matt is a program manager in regulatory affairs at Genentech, and he's got the floor now just to say a few words and introduce the topic and tonight's speakers. So go ahead, Matt.
Yep. Thank you, Sean. Really appreciate the opportunity to speak to everyone today. Really, I just want to say a few remarks and make it short and let Sean's team get to the webinar. But I really want to thank Sean, Tesh, Kasim, Brandon. I know Jerry's on, so thanks, Jerry, and really to the entire Student Development Committee. I know they've been putting in a lot of work in this competition, making it run smoothly, ensuring that really it's a rewarding experience for all of you. I do want to say a quick thanks to our sponsor, Sanofi Genzyme. It's been great having their sponsorship this year in our second year of the VIP case competition. And lastly, I really want to say thank you to all of you, all the students who are on the call and involved in this case competition. And thanks for taking on this extracurricular hands-on learning experience. And you're going above and beyond the pharmacy curriculum. And you're doing this kind of on your own time to learn more about the drug development process. So really encourage you to continue to explore and think critically as you develop your plan. Tonight's webinar offers a great opportunity to learn about some of those key elements that may enhance your plan, maybe things that you haven't thought about yet, and more importantly, really get you to have the thought process you need behind the drug development process and being able to ask the right questions. I think the webinar will do a good point, kind of that check-in here to help you move forward with your development plans and really kind of to enhance them. So again, as Sean introduced, the team is going to walk you through kind of sharing the list. So I know Tesh is going to share the logistics and give some feedback based off your midpoint submissions. An interesting aspect to the case competition this year is the challenge point that you've heard of, and Jerry is going to walk you through what that challenge point is today. And I know Sean is going to close with a Q&A. So really utilize this opportunity to get out any questions that you do have. And Sean and Tesh and the team will be more than happy to answer any of those questions you might have, maybe some pain points that you're dealing with and things you need more information on. So really now's your chance to get those out to really help your final submission. So again, just want to say thanks and wish you guys the best of luck as you put together your development plan. So with that, I am going to turn it over to Tesh, and he'll kind of walk through the logistics as the competition moves forward.
Thanks, Matt. I really appreciate that. Hi, everyone. My name is Venkatesh Shatram. I'm Global Project Leadership Fellow at Celgene Pharmaceuticals. And as Matt had mentioned, I'll just kind of be walking you guys through some of the logistics and general feedback. So on the next slide is a high-level outline for the meeting today, as we had mentioned. First, we'll be running through some logistics and reminders in terms of your final submission, then very high-level general feedback on the midpoint submissions that we've received so far. Jerry will walk you guys through the challenge point, which is a critical portion of this case competition, is properly addressing that challenge point as is listed in the rubric. And then finally, we'll have a Q&A section, which is really an open Q&A section where you guys will be able to ask any questions, and Sean will go ahead and moderate that. So let's go ahead and get started with some of the just general logistics. So I'm sure all of you are well aware of the timeline that was provided in the VIP case competition guide, but just to go over again, this past November 17th, we had our midpoint submissions due. Today we have our midpoint webinar. So the final submission due date for the VIP case competition is 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time Zone, February 25th of 2018. Please note that any submissions received after this date and time will be docked 5% of their overall score. And just to be fair to those individuals on, kind of our end who volunteer their time and effort to help us, really review these case competitions and the quick turnaround time that's expected of them, no submission will be accepted after 11:59 p.m. Eastern, February 28, 2018. So just please keep that in mind. And once again, the reason why is because of that quick turnaround time that's required to kind of evaluate the submissions and really select, the best submissions amongst them, because the plan is to have the results announced on March 11, 2018. So as you can see, that's less than 2 weeks time for the team to really review and then select the winners. And just as a note, the winning chapters will be recognized at the 2018 IPHO annual meeting as well. So continuing on, just as once again a reminder, all of this information is present within the VIP case competition guide, but we want to reiterate here. Please make sure to submit all of your materials to the email that's provided, which is ipho.vip.competition@gmail.com. Remember to properly format your email as well as submission materials using the following naming convention. So just to use an example, as it is my alma mater, if you were the University of Connecticut team, you would be UConn_final submission as your email subject. And then also your actual submission would be UConn_final submission. So in terms of the format of the submission, we do require for you to present your final submission in a PowerPoint presentation and as well as a video submission kind of narrating through the PowerPoint presentation. Now, I do mention here that your video can be in the format of your choosing. So you are allowed to use any video editing software, etc., if you are proficient in that. However, if you're not, please feel free to record the video directly in PowerPoint. There are helpful guides within your VIP case competition guide to show you how to record a video within PowerPoint, and then also a link that shares with you some tips and tricks to make a effective and clear PowerPoint presentation. Lastly, in terms of final submission review, that your final submission will be evaluated based on the rubric that's provided within that competition guide. There is a hyperlink present in there that will take you to a comprehensive guide. Just as a review, the areas that will be evaluated include the 4 kind of key functional areas that are requested of you within the case competition. So that's clinical development, regulatory affairs, medical affairs, marketing, commercial. In addition, we'll also be evaluating how well you've addressed the challenge point that will be shared with you shortly, how well you have showcased the value of industry pharmacists throughout your presentation and throughout your submission, and then finally your overall presentation. So specific language with respect to what we're looking for can be available within the rubric. I highly encourage everyone to familiarize themselves with that rubric, as that is what every evaluator will be using. Moving on. So I just want to go over some really high-level general feedback from the submissions, the midpoint submissions that we've gathered so far. One of really the overarching components of the VIP case competition is to highlight the value as well as the role of industry pharmacists. So one thing that we have seen across all the submissions is a possibility for increasing that level of detail. And one of the ways that you can really do that is by leveraging your chapter partner, who can really help you pinpoint, the direction that you should be proceeding in to further establish the impact as well as the role of industry pharmacists, as they're individuals who are currently experiencing that themselves. Another valuable resource is the IPHO website, which has lists of industry pharmacist roles that you can refer to and utilize to kind of include additional detail into your final submission. Another major aspect from the midpoint submissions is for those who are pursuing novel ideas. So in terms of novel formulations, route of administration, as well as other indications outside of your primary indication, you need to ensure that you're including the appropriate supporting steps throughout your plan. So for those of you who are planning on developing secondary and tertiary indications, that's wonderful. However, you need to showcase within your clinical development and your regulatory pathways how you're going to manage that. You can't just address your primary indication and not have any of the additional details on how you're going to address your tertiary or your secondary indications. Please note the feedback. Most of you who are on the call today, you should have received feedback from your chapter partners with respect to your midpoint submissions. There are a few outstanding that have not been returned. However, those should be arriving to you by the end of the week. We are currently working with your chapter partners, as it's been a very extremely busy time for everyone, so we're trying to get that to you ASAP. But for those of you who have, please review that feedback. If you have any questions about it, please reach out to your chapter partner. So at a very, very high level, that was the general feedback that we received from the submissions. And if there are any questions, please feel free during the end of the section when we have our open Q&A forum to go ahead and ask those questions, and we will address them as best as we can. And with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Jerry Silverman, who will now be introducing the challenge point for the 2017-2018 VIP case competition.
Hello, everybody. Especially want to thank the committee for all, the NFC Student Development Committee, for all the hard work. This is an extremely rewarding project, and it also takes a lot of work to manage it through the process. So this year we've instituted a challenge point, and I think it's it really works well for the particular case study that has been developed in the GLP, in the diabetes area. So I think, just highlighting this, it's very important that you understand that, this is becoming, this is a successful and becoming a very crowded marketplace that is, pretty well established, although certainly there are some new indications that are being added to certain of the market leaders right now. So because it is so well established, it's going to be very important that it's not that your commercial development plan also include basically value-added health, economic, and outcomes research data. And, so you can't have a plan without it. There's many different, in terms of types of things that you need to consider. How is this plan? Are you going to start it pre-launch? Are you going to wait till post-launch? Those are very important considerations. There's a lot of, next slide, Sean. Thank you. There's a lot of considerations that you have to take consideration of in terms of HEOR study design, and you're going to need to really review what kinds of things would insurance companies be looking for beyond, the classic phase 3 endpoints of efficacy and safety. What are some additional endpoints, whether it's resource utilization, quality of life, patient satisfaction? All these things are additional beyond traditional, phase 3 studies. But in a market such as this, it can be the difference, whether it's in phase 3 or phase 4, it can be the difference of the success or failure of the product, especially in this marketplace, because there's now, obviously there's from twice daily sub-Q injections to once daily, now with Trulicity at once weekly, and I think Bydureon as well. So you've got a number of products now that are advancing the market. You've also got products with multiple indications that are frequently seen with diabetes. And so, cardiovascular disease, obesity. So all these things have to be taken into consideration, especially for your launch indications and how you are going to implement an HEOR plan, whether it's going to be, phase 3 or whether or not you're going to be doing it in phase 4, and what are the designs of those particular studies going to look like, because they're very different. Some of them in phase 4 is after the product has gone out and is a little bit more retrospective in terms of economic evaluation and things like formulary restriction analysis. So you're going to need to do a lot of benchmarking to see how the current products that are on the market in this category, how they've designed their trials, the different health, their dossiers in terms of, cost effectiveness data that they're using with the insurers as well. So, that's it. I'm sure we'll have a lot of questions, some of which we don't want to give you all the answers, but, these are a lot of considerations.
Awesome. All right, I'll take it back over here. Like Matt mentioned, I'll be moderating some of these questions that you guys have. There should be a Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. If you could direct your questions there, and we will answer them for you. I'd also asked for some questions prospectively, but I didn't see any come in. Apologies if there were some that came in last minute. If you could just shoot these through here, we'll be happy to answer them here. Also, as a note, the information provided today, both the video and the details on the challenge point, will be available on the VIP website on the IPHO page. The challenge point will be in the amended competition guide, and the video will be posted similarly to the first webinar that we did in kicking off this competition.
And I just want to verify with everyone. So I know that the chat's working, as we had some people respond. For those of you who are in the process of filling out the Q&A, can someone let us know if you see where the Q&A section is at the bottom of your screen and if you're able to access it?
Anybody have any questions either on the content that we presented this evening, or on feedback you got, or something that came up during your midpoint submission as you were working through that? Okay, here's a few that are coming in. Here's one that says, is there an example of last year's winning submission that we can reference? We do have those, but we are trying to make it as least prescriptive as possible and give you guys the most leeway for creativity. Our fear is that if there is that winning submission, then a lot of this year's submissions will end up looking like that. That's why we haven't made that available. If there are any particular questions on how to do the video submission, we can answer those. For your reference, it was just a audio recorded over a PowerPoint. I think as were all the submissions from last year. So nothing included any incredible visual effects or anything. And realistically, I would point you guys to the rubric that Tesh had discussed, as it will have the grading criteria, and we're more so grading on the quality of the submission rather than the presentation itself, although that is a minor component.
Yeah, it's definitely content versus creativity in terms of, you know, slide design and that kind of thing.
Right. So we've got another question that came in asking, are we permitted to depart from the plan we developed for Midpoint? What degree of change would be permitted? Kesh, do you want to answer that one?
Sure, yeah. So, you know, naturally, based on the feedback that you would receive from your chapter partner for your midpoint submission, you may need to make adjustments to your development plan. So that, you know, we support that decision. The one thing that I would encourage everyone is if you have deviated from it, because depending, and each chapter kind of has varying degrees to which they've interacted with their chapter partners. So if you are a chapter who hasn't had as much contact with your chapter partner, I would encourage you, if you do make changes from your midpoint, to kind of keep them in the loop and continue to interact with them to continue to get that feedback. So yes, you are permitted to depart from the plan. And in terms of what degree of change would be permitted, it's really based on what degree you feel that you would need to change your current submission in order to properly address the comments that were raised at the midpoint, or if you felt that they're based on the challenge point that there's additional changes that you need to make. So you are permitted, and my one caveat to that is if you are making drastic changes, to continue to have that communication with your chapter partner. Sean, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that.
No, that sums it up perfectly, and are my sentiments. I know you guys have put in a lot of work thus far, so just take into consideration the feedback and you know, make adjustments as necessary. So I see another question coming in. This one's for Jerry. So this one's regarding the HEOR portion of the challenge point. So the question asks, are we primarily expanding on the Med Affairs responsibility only? And how do we integrate commercial, for example, into that? So maybe expand on the HEOR portion, and how is it different than the Med Affairs and commercial piece? I know they're all very integral, but maybe if you could delineate that a little bit more.
Well, it's going to, depending upon the organization, and you guys probably have a more current look, but the HEOR group is fairly separate from the medical affairs. It may come in through medical affairs, report up through medical affairs, like a medical information or possibly a drug safety, depending upon how the organization is set up. But the health economics and outcomes research commercial function, the department, is very much separate and has specialists that are involved, i.e., I mean, there's separate fellowships and that specialize in HEOR, and you know, the people in that department in pharma, there's even separate, a lot of times there's even separate MSLs that they'll call MOMs, medical outcomes managers. And so they're functioning as an MSL, but they're specifically specialized. There's not as many of them. They may have one region, or they may have half the country, but there's certainly, you know, similar. There's an internal component, and obviously the HEOR department is going to be working, they're going to be working with their peers in medical affairs, but it is a subspecialty. And again, while it may come up through medical affairs in most companies, it very much is not going to be, you'll be working with the medical affairs staff, but it certainly is a subspecialty within that organization, within, pharma. Does that help? I don't know if I answered everything specifically or not.
She says, yes, thank you.
Great.
Thank you very much for that, Jerry. Another quick question came in. Has the challenge point been introduced yet? Yes, and this video will also be available, as will the challenge point, so everyone can review separate from here. All right. Here's another one that comes in. How much freedom do we have when differentiating our product from other products currently on the market? This has been a pretty common question, and we've seen chapters with some very interesting ideas on how to differentiate. Now, what we ask was brought up as part of the feedback is that if you are looking to do something perhaps novel or maybe has only been done a few times or something emerging, we just ask that you have a realistic way to back it up. That's in your clinical plan, that's in your regulatory pathways, and also how are you going to support it in your med affairs and your commercial activities. One thing, for example, that we've seen is a lot of times people will have multiple indications. However, when they are discussing their clinical plans and the regulatory plans, they're really just talking about the one indication. In that instance, we would ask that you can elaborate on everything that you're trying to propose. But that being said, I think it's more important to have a strong submission, kind of with the fundamentals and done really well, than it is to go crazy with your product. And hopefully that makes sense.
I would like to just piggyback what Sean said exactly. I think, while we don't want to limit your creativity, this is a pharmacologic class that has, a significant degree of history now. And if you benchmark the class well, which it's going to take to develop a good submission, you're going to see that there has been, it's not a homogeneous class. It's, there are differences in compounds, but there's incremental differences. And I think keep that in mind. You won't be, like Sean says, you're not going to be able to provide strong rationale to back up if you go too crazy. Where this class is, there's no documentation whatsoever or any, trends that are showing benefits in certain areas.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. A few more logistical questions have come in. Is there any specific software that we would recommend for making our timeline visual? They asked about Visio. Test perhaps in project management, you're more familiar with this. I previously used just Word. I don't know if you're familiar with Visio or have anything else to add to that.
Sure. In terms of, well, to address the question, if there's specific software that we recommend, not necessarily, as every individual will have access to difference. I know if you're referring to timelines, a software that we use a lot is Microsoft Project. Kind of have a project plan or a one-pager to kind of develop our timeline. In fact, the example that is shown in the VIP case guide is a one-pager cutout as well. However, in terms of, you know, actually creating your timeline and kind of giving it a visual look to it, there isn't one that we particularly recommend. We do kind of leave that creative freedom to the individuals that are in charge of making, kind of designing the presentation. And I believe the next question, and Sean, I can just go ahead and address it, as I believe it was from the same individual, in terms of a limit on how many slides can be in the PowerPoint presentation, as well as a limit on how long the video PowerPoint presentation should be. We do not list a specific limit in terms of number of slides, nor on how long the video or the PowerPoint presentation should be. However, once again, referring to the rubric, and for those of you who are getting tired of me saying that, I will say it once again, referring to the rubric, as that's really going to be your guide to success. With respect to the overall presentation, you know, to get the highest score there, the slides would have to be very clear. They would have to flow appropriately, and you know, visually pleasing being one of them. So being able to make effective slides that kind of get your point across. So while there isn't a limit on the number of slides that there can be, it may be the case if you have redundant slides, or essentially slides that detract from the overall flow of your presentation, that could actually be a detriment to your overall presentation. So I would just caution individuals in that regard. And there is no limit on how long the video or PowerPoint presentation should be. However, you know, speaking as one of the individuals who will be the evaluator, please keep that in mind, that people won't have the ability to sit down and listen to a 3-hour-long video to evaluate it. So just to keep the evaluators in mind when you are creating this video is my little plea for that. Sean, Jerry, I'm not sure if you have anything to add to.
Oh, I'm just wondering, I know that there was benchmarking done from last year, you know, from all the submissions, and I don't know if we collected from that benchmarking, did we collect any information on the averages, maybe the mode, in terms of how long? I'm trying to think of the reviews and stuff, and
Yeah.
I think that they weren't they pretty much what they seem to end up to be about 60 to 90 minutes. Is that, I wouldn't want to.
No, Jerry, that's not right. I think the majority of the presentations were just about 15 or 20 minutes.
Oh, they were that.
Yeah, we weren't looking for anything that long, and just as we're doing this year, I think there's an art to being succinct and conveying the information that you're trying to get across, and just keep that in mind as you're putting together your slides. Although there is no limit, I think 15 to 20 minutes is reasonable for presenting information.
Why did that they were longer last year? I mean, that's great. I just thought that they were longer.
For all our sakes, I'm glad they weren't, although I'm sure they would have been great. All right, so we've got a few more questions here, and by all means, we still got 20 minutes, so if you have more, feel free to continue to ask them. So here's another one on the challenge point. This is more logistics, so I will go ahead and take the lead on it. It asks for the challenge point. Is the objective for them to answer the 4 bullet questions in that slide, incorporating the answers into the respective sections, including clinical development, med affairs, etc. So really what we would be looking for here is you to answer them not simultaneously with the clinical development and med affairs, but to address it separately. So you might have a clinical development slide and a med affairs slide. So this should really be separate. It's true that all of these things are intermingled because, you know, developing a drug is just cross-functional in its nature, and there's going to be spillover from one to the other. But but I would definitely recommend addressing this and pointing it out separately, because while there are bits and pieces in HEOR, they are definitely not as prominent as, you know, the core discipline of the clinical or the regulatory, et cetera. Cash or Jerry, do you have anything to add to that?
I don't.
No.
I think you did a great
And I
job.
just want to know, because I was checking while you were answering that question, and you're right, Sean, they're like really all the last the five final submissions, you know, the top 5 were all in the 20 to 30-minute range.
Gotcha. All right. Thanks for checking on that.
No, I'm glad, because I thought something different. Maybe there was one that stood out to me that was long, so I was just checking that.
You may have graded one that was longer. All right. We've got one more question that's in here right now. So are there any specific references or sources that we could provide them with that will provide some of this background of the challenge point in terms of pharmacoeconomic information on GLP-1 agonists? So Jerry, maybe you can touch on some things for them to look into. I will also say that we will try to include some helpful references, as we have done for the other sections, just like clinical development, regulatory affairs. We'll add some resources to the resource page in the appendix of the competition guide when that.
Yeah, I don't know if you could probably check the, you know, under some of the existing products, their monographs. I don't think that their dossiers are in the public domain, the AMCP dossiers. So, you know, a lot of this information, though, is out there. And so you're really just going to have to search for those HEOR studies for the individual products that are currently on the market. That'll probably give you, you know, certainly the best benchmarking that you're going to find. You've probably got greater access to me as a student than I do, just as I don't have access to all of the different clinical study databases.
Jerry, is there a specific keyword or way they should search these? Are they looking for GLP-1 pharmacoeconomic studies, or how are these typically framed?
Exactly what you would look for. And yeah, that's exactly what you would look for. I, you know, just want to remind everybody that HEOR study designs don't come out of the blue. They're very much attached as a core. They're still very much related, whether prospectively or retrospectively, to fundamental efficacy and safety endpoints. So, you know, just in other words, if you have a product that is not good, efficacy or safety, don't expect you're going to have, you know, positive health, economic, and outcomes research data. They're very much connected. It's just a different kind of a, you know, an endpoint. It's more of a financial or a patient satisfaction. So they're just different outcomes endpoints.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll give it about 30 seconds here to see if any more questions come in. And if not, we can wrap up this evening's webinar. So while we're waiting, once again, I'd just like to thank Jerry and Tesh and Matt and really everybody who's helped out thus far with bringing together the competition. All the chapters that are in attendance tonight and all the chapters that are participating, we understand how much work it is for you guys. And like Matt said, you're really going above and beyond the scope of your work. And we hope this is a really beneficial competition for you, so you can learn more about the drug development process and really enrich your understanding as you try to figure out where you might see yourself in the future in the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, and just to kind of go off of what Sean said, this is definitely a unique experience that all of you that are going through this have the opportunity to take part in. And I will say, what you take away from this experience and what you've learned, you can speak to during your interviews for fellowships or just in general within the industry, as this is in many ways this project and this case competition are providing you with insights into the roles and the possibilities for pharmacists within the industry, unlike anything else before. So definitely, kudos to everyone again who's participating in all the hard work that you put in so far.
Well, then I will go ahead and conclude tonight's webinar. Again, thank you, everybody. We truly appreciate your participation and joining on tonight, and best of luck in the second half of the BIP case competition. Thank you.